The human floated in the cold dark of space. His ship had been broken into pieces. His oxygen was almost gone. He thought it was the end. But then, a shadow moved across the stars. It was not a human ship. It was something larger, stranger, alive. With strange blue light, the last thing he saw before he fainted was the great vessel pulling him inside. When he opened his eyes again, he was no longer in space. He was inside a chamber of gold and black metal. The air smelled heavy and sweet. Strange symbols glowed on the walls and tall figures stood around him, speaking a language he should not have known. But he did. Somehow he understood every word. Another rare creature. One alien voice said. "He will amuse the Empress," another replied. They looked down at him as if he was nothing more than a pet. The human kept his face still. His eyes half closed, he acted weak, small, helpless, but his mind was awake and sharp. He listened to every word. Then she arrived, the Empress. Her presence filled the chamber like fire and storm together. She was taller than the others, her skin glowing like polished stone. Her eyes burned with golden light. Every alien in the room bowed low, but she did not bow. She looked at him, and only at him. A slow smile touched her face. "What a fragile thing," she said. "Yet charming." The aliens around her laughed softly. She walked closer, her long robes whispering across the floor. The human's heart pounded. He forced himself to stay still. She reached out and touched his hair like one might touch a rare animal. "This one will be mine," she declared. "He will stay in my palace." The guards nodded at once. The decision was final. The human had been claimed, but not as a guest, not as an equal, as a possession. He was carried through long, shining halls. Statues of alien warriors towered above him. Strange beasts with crystal eyes stared from cages, and everywhere, the mark of the Empress was carved into the walls. The palace was beautiful but also cold, a place where one wrong word could mean death, and he was being placed in the center of it. Finally, they brought him to a chamber. Soft light glowed from the ceiling. Pillows of silver fabric were spread on the floor. There was food he did not know, fruits that glowed faintly, water that shimmered like liquid glass. It was a cage, but it was a golden cage, and it was his new home. He sat silently. He wanted to scream, but he held his voice. He remembered their words. They thought he could not understand them. They believed he was just a creature. That was his advantage. That was his secret. When the Empress came again, she sat before him. She spoke freely, not caring if he understood. Her words cut like blades. She spoke of her power, her victories, her enemies. The human kept his eyes low. He nodded like a dumb pet when she reached out. But inside, he repeated every word, every detail. He was building a map of her empire. In his mind, still, fear crawled in his chest. What if he made one mistake? What if he moved too quickly or looked too smart? Would they kill him? Would they tear him apart in some alien lab? He knew he had to be careful. He had to play his role. The Empress laughed. To her, he was only entertainment. To him, she was danger and opportunity together. He listened to her laughter and thought of home. He thought of Earth, far away. He thought of the humans who had no idea where he was. For now he was alone. But he was not broken. He would survive, and maybe, just maybe, he would rise. As the chamber doors closed and the guards left him alone, he looked around at the alien luxury. He clenched his fists and whispered inside his own mind, "They think I am their pet, but they will learn the truth." Outside, the stars burned bright beyond the palace walls, and somewhere in that endless night, his fate was waiting. He was captured, yes, But the story of his capture was only the beginning. The human woke in silence. The chamber around him glowed with soft golden light. Strange curtains of silver mist floated across the walls. The floor was covered in rugs that looked like woven stars. It was beautiful, yes, but it was not freedom. It was a cage, only dressed in gold. Every morning servants entered the chamber. They placed bowls of fruit that glowed faintly. They poured water that shined like liquid diamonds. They never spoke to him, not directly. They whispered to each other in the alien tongue. But he understood every word. They thought their pet could hear only meaningless sound. But in truth, he was collecting secrets. He sat quietly. He ate little, drank little, and listened much. He learned that the Empress was feared by her own court. He learned that she had enemies not only in other worlds, but also inside her palace. He heard names of generals, whispers of betrayal, and he stored them all in his mind. When the Empress entered, the room always changed. The air grew heavy, the guards bowed, and even the servants held their breath. But she, the Empress, walked like a queen of fire. She sat on soft cushions and looked at him with curious eyes. Her golden gaze did not see a man. She saw only a rare prize, something to own, to tame, to admire. She spoke freely in front of him, telling her thoughts aloud, telling her secrets to what she thought was a dumb creature. But he heard every word. He learned that she had dreams of eternal rule. He learned that she feared the council of elders. And he learned that she trusted no one, not even her closest guards. Still, sometimes her words surprised him. Late at night, when the chamber was quiet, she would speak softer, almost sad. She spoke of loneliness, of battles that left her empty, of voices of her ancestors that haunted her. The human listened and felt something strange. She was powerful, yes, but also alone, and that made her dangerous in a different way. One day she tested him. She dropped a piece of strange crystal food in front of him. "Eat," she said. Her voice was sharp. He obeyed, chewing slowly, pretending not to think. She smiled like a queen pleased with her animal, but in her eyes he saw the truth. She was watching closely. She was studying him too. Every night, when the chamber grew silent, he lay awake. The alien stars glowed through the window. He thought of Earth. He thought of humans who had no idea he was here. He thought of the Empress and of the dangerous game he was playing, because the cage was not only walls of gold, it was a stage. The Empress thought she owned a pet. But he was watching, learning, waiting. Every servant who whispered became a teacher. Every guard who complained became a guide. Every careless word gave him another weapon. And still, the Empress grew closer. She began to sit near him longer. She began to feed him by hand. She began to speak of her memories as if he was not a man but a mirror. Her loneliness poured out like water, and he, silent, was forced to drink it all. But the more he learned, the greater the risk. One wrong look, one wrong sound. If she ever guessed the truth, that he understood, the game would end in fire, and he would not leave the palace alive, so he played the role perfectly. He bowed his head when she reached out. He blinked slowly like an animal with no thoughts, but inside his mind, he was alive with secrets. Secrets of the Empress. Secrets of the palace. Secrets of an empire that did not know one small human was listening. And every day, he told himself the same words. I am not a pet. I am not a toy. I am waiting. One night, as the Empress walked away, he caught a whisper from her guards. The council is moving against her. One said, "She does not know yet," replied the other. The human's heart raced. Now he carried knowledge more dangerous than chains. The golden cage was still a cage, but inside it, He now held the sharpest blade of all. Truth. He lay, back on the star-woven rugs, his eyes closed, his mind alive. The palace around him glittered like a trap. The Empress believed he was her possession, but one day soon, she would learn the truth, that the pet in the golden cage was never truly silent. The palace of the Empress was alive with whispers. Servants bowed low. Guards stood like statues. But when the Empress entered the chamber of her human pet, the air always changed. It became softer, quieter, almost like the palace itself was. Holding its breath, the human sat on his cushion of silver fabric, his head bowed, his eyes calm. He played the role perfectly, to all who looked at him. He was nothing more than a silent creature, but behind his still eyes his mind was awake. He listened, he remembered, and he waited. The Empress entered slowly. Her golden robe shone like fire. Her crown of crystal caught the light and spread it across the room. The guards bowed, then left. The doors closed. And suddenly it was only her and him. At first she treated him like a pet. She gave him strange food. She laughed at his silence. She touched his hair as if he was something soft to hold. But then, over time, she began to speak. Not to the court, not to her generals, but to him, because she believed he could not understand. And that belief made her careless. She spoke of battles, of nights where her soldiers died screaming, of planets that burned under her command. She spoke of the weight of the crown, of enemies in the council who smiled in public and plotted in secret. Her voice was proud, but beneath it he heard another sound: loneliness. Sometimes late at night she came without her crown. Her golden armor was gone. She wore simple robes, her hair unbound. She looked younger, almost human. She sat close to him, her eyes dim with sadness. She whispered things no ruler should ever whisper. "I trust no one," she said. "Not my council, not my generals, not even the stars." She leaned close, her voice low. "They all want my throne, my life, my blood." The human stayed silent. But inside his mind, the truth burned. He knew her secrets now. Secrets she would kill anyone else for speaking. She believed she was safe with him, because she thought he was deaf to meaning. But he understood every word. Her secrets painted a picture, an empire strong on the outside but cracked within, a throne that glittered but stood on shaking ground, and at the center a lonely ruler, a woman who wore power like armor, but beneath it she was afraid. One evening, as the two moons of her world rose in the alien sky, she spoke more openly than ever. She told him of her childhood, of the day she was chosen as heir. She spoke of the endless training, the endless battles. She spoke of friends lost to war. Her golden eyes softened, and for the first time, the human saw not only an empress but a woman trapped by her own crown. He felt a pull inside. Pity perhaps, or something more dangerous. He told himself to stay cold. He told himself to remember she had stolen his freedom. But emotions are not easy to chain, and the closer she came, the more dangerous the game became. Because if she ever looked too closely, if she ever saw the spark of understanding in his eyes, then the secret would be out, and he would not be her pet. He would be her enemy. And enemies of the Empress did not live long. Still, the Empress spoke. She walked around him, her hands trailing across the golden walls. "They think I'm untouchable," she whispered. "They think I do not feel fear." She turned back to him, her eyes sharp. "But I do feel fear, little one." She smiled faintly, bitterly. "But no one else will ever know." The human lowered his head. He let his body stay limp and obedient. But inside his heart pounded. He was holding a secret that could destroy her. A secret that could save her too. and he wondered which path he would take. That night after she left, he lay awake on the silver cushions, her words echoing in his mind. She was powerful, yes, but she was also fragile. The empire was vast, yes, but it was also filled with cracks. He was only one human, yes, but he was inside the heart of it, listening, learning, waiting. And he knew one thing for certain. The Empress trusted no one, but she had given her secrets to him, because she thought he was nothing, and that mistake would change everything. The palace of the Empress stood like a mountain of gold. From the outside it looked strong, unshakable, eternal. But inside its walls, whispers moved like snakes, soft voices in shadowed halls, secrets. Carried by servants, the human heard them all. He was not free, yet he was everywhere. Servants brought him through gardens where alien birds sang. Guards carried him across bridges of light. He was shown to nobles as a strange pet of the Empress, and every time voices rose around him. They thought he was nothing. They thought he could not understand. And so they spoke carelessly, and he listened carefully. He heard about shortages. In the outer colonies, he heard about generals who complained behind closed doors. He heard about taxes that bled the people. He heard about fear. But most of all, he heard about rebellion. The words came first as fragments. One servant whispering, "They gather in secret," another muttering, "The Empress is blind to it." Then guards louder and bolder. "They wait for the council's signal. They will strike soon." The human kept his face still, his body quiet, but inside his mind burned with the truth. The empire was not as strong as it looked. The golden walls were already cracking. And the Empress, so proud, so powerful, did not know, or maybe she refused to see. One evening, as the Empress entered his chamber, she spoke freely as always. She told him of victories, of battles won. But behind her words, he heard something else, the edge of fear. He wondered if she felt the rebellion pressing close, or if she trusted her throne too much to notice. As she fed him glowing fruit from her hand, the human's thoughts twisted. He was no longer only a prisoner. He was no longer only a silent pet. He was holding a secret that could change everything. The rebellion wanted her throne, her life, her empire. If he said nothing, maybe they would succeed, and the Empress who caged him would fall. But if she fell, what would happen to him? Would the rebels free him, or kill him as a symbol of her rule? He did not know. One night, the truth came sharper than ever. He was taken by guards to a great hall. The Empress was there, speaking with her generals. They did not notice the silent human kneeling at her side. They spoke openly. "The council grows restless," one general said. "They speak of betrayal," another whispered. The Empress's eyes burned. "Let them speak," she said. "They forget who commands the armies." Her voice was strong, but her fingers tightened on the arm of her throne. The human saw it. The Empress was not blind. She knew, and still she trusted no one enough to share her fear. Later that night, as the human was returned to his chamber, 2 guards lingered near the door, their voices low. "If the rebellion begins, we will not fight for her," one said. The other nodded. "We will fight for the council, and the council will reward us." The human lay still on his cushions, but every word carved into his mind. The palace itself was divided. Her own guards would turn against her. The rebellion was not far. It was already inside her walls. He stared up at the glowing ceiling. The silence pressed on him like weight. He wanted to laugh. The most powerful ruler in the galaxy was surrounded by enemies, and the only one who knew the full truth was a man she thought was an animal. The irony burned in his chest, but it was also dangerous because knowledge was sharper than any blade, and now he held it. The next morning, the Empress came again. She sat close, her golden eyes calm, She spoke of stars, of distant wars, of her dreams of endless rule. He bowed his head, pretending to be simple, but inside he thought of the rebellion. He thought of her enemies, smiling while sharpening knives. He thought of the decision pressing closer each day. Should he help her, or should he watch her fall? The golden cage no longer felt safe. It felt like the center of a storm that was growing louder, closer. He closed his eyes, his hands hidden in his lap, and whispered only to himself. They whisper of rebellion, Empress, and you do not hear them, but I do. The day began with silence, but it was not the silence of peace. It was the silence before thunder. The human felt it the moment the guards came. They did not carry food. They did not bring gifts. They brought chains of shining silver. The chains were not heavy. They were not meant for pain. They were meant for display. The guards bowed before the Empress and placed the chains on him. He was dressed in fine cloth, colored in deep blue. Gold bands were placed around his wrists. He was no longer just a pet hidden in a chamber. He was to be shown to the court. The great hall of the Empress was vast. Its walls rose like mountains. The ceiling was alive with light from the twin suns above the planet. Nobles and generals filled the chamber. They bowed as the Empress entered, her steps echoing like drums of war. She walked to her throne and sat high above them all. Then her eyes turned to him. "Bring my creature," she said. The guards pulled him forward. The human walked slowly, carefully, every step a performance, his head low, his face blank. He was the picture of obedience. But inside, his heart pounded like thunder. The nobles laughed softly when they saw him. "A curious thing," one said. "Is this the treasure our Empress keeps?" whispered another. The human kept his eyes lowered, but his ears caught every word. The language they thought was hidden was as clear as his own, and what he heard was poison. "Her power is fading," one noble murmured. "She hides weakness behind pets and trophies," another whispered. "When the council strikes, we will not stand in her way." The human felt the chains cold on his wrists. He wanted to turn to show them he understood, but he did not. He remained silent, for silence was his weapon. The Empress leaned forward on her throne, her golden eyes locked on him. "See," she said proudly, "even the wildest creatures bow to me." The nobles clapped politely, but their smiles were sharp. The human could feel it. This was no celebration. This was a test. He was not the only one being judged. The Empress herself was on trial in the eyes of her court. Her enemies searched for cracks in her armor. They searched for weakness in her rule. And unknowingly, she had made him part of that game. As he stood in the center of the hall, the generals began to speak. "The armies grow restless," one said. "The people grow tired," another added. The Empress answered with pride, her voice rising strong. "My armies are loyal, my people are strong, my rule is eternal." But the human saw her hands tighten on the throne. He saw her jaw clench as the whispers grew louder. Then a noble woman stepped forward, her voice calm, her smile sharp. "Your Majesty, what lesson does this creature bring us?" she asked. "Why show us an animal today when the empire trembles?" The hall went quiet. The words were bold, dangerous, but no one spoke against them. The Empress's eyes narrowed, her golden gaze burned. She rose from her throne, her voice echoing like thunder. "This creature is mine, it obeys me, it is proof that all things obey me, even the unknown." Her voice shook the hall. The nobles bowed their heads, but the human could hear their hidden laughter. To them, the display was not strength, it was weakness. The Empress turned to him. Kneel, she commanded. He obeyed, dropping to the floor. Kiss the ground before your empress, she said. He pressed his lips to the cold stone, the hall filled with whispers, some mocking, some impressed. The empress raised her hands. See, she cried. Even the stars themselves will kneel. Before me, the human lifted his head slowly, his face empty, his eyes dull, but inside fire burned. He had heard their whispers, their threats, their laughter. The empress did not see it, but he did. The rebellion was closer than she knew, closer than anyone would admit. When the test ended, the guards pulled him back. He was returned to his chamber, the chains removed. The golden silence returning, but he did not rest. He sat in the dim light, his hands clenched. He had survived the test, but the danger was growing. He could feel it in every whisper, every hidden word. The rebellion was coming, and he was trapped in the middle. As he lay down on the star-woven rug, he whispered into the silence of the cage, "They think I am nothing, but I hear everything." And his eyes glowed with quiet fire, for he knew the storm was almost here. And when it came, his choice would change everything. The palace that once stood like an unshakable mountain began to tremble. The night was quiet at first, too quiet. The human woke from uneasy sleep, his ears catching something strange. Not the footsteps of guards, not the whispers of servants, but the sound of distant thunder. Except it was not thunder, it was war. The walls shook, shouts rang through the golden halls. The human rose to his feet, his heart racing. From beyond the chamber door came the sound of steel against steel, the crack of weapons, the cries of soldiers. The rebellion had come. It was no longer whispers. It was fire and blood. The chamber door burst open. 2 guards stumbled inside, their armor broken. "The rebels are inside the palace." One gasped. "They are everywhere." The other dragged him out, their voices fading. The human stood alone in the golden cage, his breath sharp. He had known this day would come, but knowing was different from living it. Then she appeared, the Empress, her golden robes torn, her crown gone. Her eyes burned brighter than ever. Behind her, guards fought desperately to hold the rebels back. "Come," she snapped. She seized his arm with a grip like iron. For the first time, she did not see a pet. She saw something else, someone to carry with her into the storm. They ran through corridors filled with smoke. The once perfect walls cracked and burning. Bodies of guards and rebels lay scattered. The palace of gold was no longer a symbol of eternity. It was a battlefield. The human kept his head down, his heart pounding, but his mind was awake, sharp, alive. He listened to the shouts, the commands, the cries. He understood the rebel voices as clearly as the Empress's, and what he heard made him tremble. "Take the throne room," one rebel shouted. "Kill the Empress, no mercy," another cried. The human glanced at her. She walked tall even through the chaos, her blade in her hand, her voice sharp as steel. "Hold the lines, protect the crown," she shouted, but he could see the truth. Her empire was falling. The golden mountain was crumbling under her feet. They reached a hidden passage. Stone doors slid open, revealing a dark stair. "Down," she ordered. Her voice was cold, her golden eyes burned. As she pulled him inside, the stair spiraled into shadow. The sounds of battle grew distant. Only their breaths remained in the silence. The human felt the weight of choice pressing on him. If he stayed silent, he would remain her pet. If he spoke, he would reveal everything, his secret, his knowledge, his power. The words burned in his throat, but he held them. Not yet, not here. The time was close, but not now. At the bottom of the stair was a hidden hall. The Empress leaned against the wall, her chest rising and falling. Her blade still shone with blood. She looked at him, her voice low. "They think I am finished," she whispered. "They think rebellion will end me." Her hand tightened on his shoulder. "But they do not know me." Her eyes narrowed. "I will not fall." The human stared at her. Her words were fire, but her hands trembled. Her empire was burning above them, and she clung to pride as if it was a shield. But he knew the truth. He had heard the whispers. He had seen the rebellion, and he knew that even she could not stop it alone. The hall shook again. Stone dust rained from the ceiling. The rebels were close. Their voices echoed, "Find her! She is here!" The Empress raised her blade, her jaw tight. The human's heart raced. He could remain silent. He could let the rebels find her, and it would all end here, or he could act and change everything. The choice burned in him. The secret he had carried since the day of his capture, the secret he had hidden with blank eyes and quiet lips. It pressed at his throat like fire. And then, for the first time, he let it out. "Empress," he said, his voice sharp. "Human, alive, I understand you." Her golden eyes widened. The sword in her hand almost fell. For the first time since he met her, she looked truly shocked. Her voice trembled. "You? Speak." The human nodded. "I always understood," he said. "I heard every word, every secret, every fear." The hall shook again. The rebels' steps closing in. The Empress stared at him, her breath sharp, her eyes burning with something, between rage and awe. "You are no pet," she whispered. "No," he answered, his voice calm. "I am not." Above them, the palace of gold burned. The empire trembled. The rebellion roared. And in the shadows of the hidden hall, the game changed forever. The hidden hall shook with every strike above. The rebels were tearing the palace apart. The golden empire of the Empress was burning from inside. Smoke drifted down the stair, carrying with it the cries of war. The human stood face to face with the Empress, his words still hanging in the air. "I understand you," he had said, and now there was no silence left between them. The Empress stared at him, her golden eyes wide, her blade trembling in her grip. "You," she whispered. "You were listening all this time." The human nodded, her face twisted, anger and shock battling inside her. "You heard my secrets, my fears, my truth," she hissed. "Yes," he said calmly, "and now I must decide what they mean." For a long moment, there was only silence. Then the sound of boots on stone grew louder. The rebels were close, their voices echoing through the passage. "Find her, she cannot escape." The Empress lifted her sword again. She looked like fire trapped in human form, but he saw the truth in her eyes. She was powerful, yes, but she was cornered, and even fire dies when it is surrounded. She took a step toward him, her voice low, sharp as a blade. "If you betray me, I will cut you down myself," she said. The human met her gaze. For the first time, he did not lower his head. For the first time, he stood as more than a pet. "You may kill me," he answered, "but then who will save you?" The rebels' voices grew louder. The stone door shuddered under the weight of strikes. There was no more time. The human stepped closer, his voice steady. "You are alone." "Empress," he said, "your council betrays you. Your generals betray you. Your guards betray you." Her jaw tightened, but she did not deny it. "You have no one left," he whispered, "except me." The Empress's breath shook. Her golden eyes burned with rage, pride, fear. She lowered the blade a fraction. The human pressed on. "I can lead you out," he said. "I know their words, their plans, their moves." I have listened, I have remembered, and now those secrets are yours if you trust me. Trust. The word was poison in her world. Trust had killed kings and queens before her. Trust was weakness, and yet in this moment, with fire raining above and rebels at her door, she had no choice. Her lips curled into a bitter smile. You are a liar, she said, or you are my last hope. The stone cracked. The rebels broke through, blades flashing in the dim light. Their leader stepped forward, his voice sharp. End her, he commanded. The Empress raised her sword, but she was outnumbered. The human felt the moment stretch. This was it, this was the turning point, and then he moved. He stepped in front of the Empress, his voice cutting through the air. She is not alone, he said. The rebels froze, shocked to hear the creature speak. Their eyes widened, their blades hesitated. He speaks, one whispered. He was never her pet. Another hissed. The leader narrowed his eyes. You are nothing, he spat. But the human's voice rose stronger. I am nothing to you, he said, but I know your secrets. He spoke the names of the rebel councils. He spoke of their hidden plans. He spoke of their lies, their betrayals. The rebels shifted uneasily, their own secrets revealed by the one they thought was nothing. The Empress's eyes glowed brighter than fire. Her lips curved into a smile, sharp and dangerous. She stepped forward beside him, her voice thundering. You thought me blind, she roared. You thought me weak. She lifted her blade high. But you forgot. I see through the eyes of all creatures, even those you call small. The rebels faltered. Their leader raised his blade. But in that instant the Empress struck. Her sword cut through the smoke. Her guards, loyal still to her power, rushed from hidden doors. The hall filled with battle. The rebels screamed as the Empress fought like a storm. And through it all, the human stood silent. He had made his choice. He had revealed himself. And there was no turning back. When the last rebel fell, the hall was red with fire and blood. The Empress stood breathing hard, her blade dripping. She turned to him slowly. Her golden eyes studied him, not as a pet, not as a toy, but as something else. You betrayed them for me, she said. His voice was calm. I chose my own path. For a long moment she said, nothing. Then she stepped closer, her hand brushing his face. You are not my pet, she whispered. You are my weapon. Her lips curved into a smile. And weapons I do not throw away. The human looked into her burning eyes. He did not smile. He did not bow. He simply whispered, I always understood you. And in that moment, in the ashes of a burning palace, a new bond was forged, not of chains, not of crowns, but of secrets and fire. The empire had burned, yes, but its story was not over. Because now the Empress had a weapon she never expected, and the human was no longer silent, he was ready.